Prince Andrew, another narcissist fucks up. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've created a number of videos about Prince Andrew, explaining why he is a narcissist and also explaining many of his behaviours through the prism of his narcissism. If you have not watched those videos, I recommend that you do so. Andrew has placed his titles in abeyance. In effect, King Charles had had enough, and will have stated to Andrew, "You're going to lose the titles, however, you can save some face by agreeing that you'll place them into abeyance." And accordingly, that is what has happened. It gives him a sense of control, because it makes it seem like it was his decision to do this, when in actual fact he was backed into a corner. What this demonstrates is once again how the narcissist fucks up, how give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves. Andrew was born Andrew Albert Christian Edward on February the 19th, 1960 at Buckingham Palace, and he entered the world as the third child and second son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. He was the first child born to a reigning British monarch since 1857, marking a significant moment in royal history. From the outset, his life was steeped in unparalleled privilege, surrounded by the opulence of the British monarchy. As a baby, he was cradled in the historic settings of Balmoral Castle in Scotland during family holidays. His christening at Buckingham Palace was a grand affair, attended by dignitaries and covered extensively by the media, setting the tone for a life under the spotlight, but shielded by royal protocol and wealth. His childhood was a blend of tradition and luxury. He spent his early years at Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace, with access to private tutors, nannies, and the finest amenities. Unlike ordinary children, his playtime involved pony rides on royal grounds, skiing trips to the Swiss Alps, and summers at Sandringham House. Aged 8, he was enrolled at Heatherdown Preparatory School, a prestigious institution known for educating the elite, where fees were covered by the royal purse. This was followed by Gordonston School in Scotland, the same rugged boarded school his father and older brother Charles attended. His adolescence was marked by a reputation for charm and adventure, earning him the nickname Randy Andy in the tabloids for his romantic escapades. He dated actresses and models, including Koo Stark, the American actress, which fueled media frenzy but was ultimately protected by palace PR machines. His social circle including celebrities and aristocrats, attending lavish parties and events where champagne flowed freely. This period highlighted the freedom afforded to him. Unlike commoners, his indiscretions were often glossed over, and he enjoyed immunity in many contexts. In 1979, at 19, he joined the Royal Navy, a move that blended duty with privilege. He trained as a helicopter pilot at the Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, where his royal status ensured specialised attention. His career peaked during the 1982 Falklands War, where he served aboard HMS Invincible as a Sea King helicopter pilot. Tasked with decoy missions to draw enemy fire away from ships, he was hailed as a war hero on his return, receiving the South Atlantic Medal. The media portrayed him as a dashing naval officer, boosting his public image. Post-war, he continued in the Navy, rising to the rank of commander by 1999 with postings that included flying lessons, international deployments, and ceremonial roles. His military role was cushioned by royal allowances, allowing him to maintain a playboy lifestyle alongside service. In 1986, he wed Sarah Fergie Ferguson in a spectacular ceremony at Westminster Abbey, watched by millions worldwide. The event cost taxpayers millions. They were granted Sunning Hill Park as a wedding gift, a sprawling mansion built with public funds, which they later sold controversially for a profit. The couple's life was one of jet-setting, ski vacations in Verbier, golf trips to exclusive resorts, and attendance at high society galas. Andrew's role as a father to Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie involved providing them with elite educations at schools like St George's, Ascot and Marlborough College, along with introductions to influential networks. After leaving the Navy in 2001, he transitioned to a role as the UK Special Representative for International Trade and Investment, a position that epitomised his privileged access. For a decade, he globetrotted on taxpayer-funded trips, dubbed Air Miles Andy for his extensive use of private jets and helicopters. He rubbed shoulders with world leaders, billionaires and celebrities, promoting British business interests. This included stays at luxury hotels, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants and golf outings with tycoons. He visited over 50 countries from China to the Middle East, forging deals while enjoying VIP treatment. He led a privileged lifestyle, and one, of course, which he saw as one that he was completely entitled to. A life that he deemed was entirely appropriate because he saw himself as hugely important, and these were the trappings of his life that he was perfectly entitled to. And then, as a consequence of his belief that he was special, as a consequence of the belief that he could do as he wanted, that he was not accountable for his actions, that he behaved in a manner whereby he was focused upon what was needed in the moment, although, of course, he didn't actually realise that was why he behaved. He engaged in the commission of a number of acts which has resulted, in effect, his downfall. Back in the 1990s, he met Jeffrey Epstein. He admitted that he saw him infrequently, saying he probably saw him no more than once or twice a year. During the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, jurors heard that Andrew flew on Epstein's private plane with a 14-year-old girl in the mid-1990s. In 2000, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell attended a party at Windsor Castle hosted by Queen Elizabeth II to mark Andrew's 40th birthday, the Princess Royal's 50th, the Queen Mother's 100th, and Princess Margaret's 70th. He decides that it is appropriate to have these two individuals attend a party. In 2001, Virginia Giuffre claimed she was forced to have had sex with Andrew on 3 occasions, with the first encounter allegedly taking place in Ghislaine Maxwell's London townhouse in 2001. She also claimed to have had sex with Andrew at Epstein's New York flat and at an orgy on the private island that belonged to Epstein in the Caribbean. In 2008, Epstein is jailed for sex offences after admitting prostituting minors and is sentenced to 18 months in prison. In 2009, Epstein's former housekeeper testifies that Andrew had daily massages at the paedophile's Florida home. In 2010, Epstein is released from jail. Andrew is photographed with him in New York Central Park. Years later, footage emerges showing Prince Andrew inside Epstein's Manhattan mansion, where he's seen looking out from a large door of the property waving a woman goodbye after Epstein leaves to get into a chauffeur-driven car. In 2011, Andrew quits as UK trade envoy after the fallout from the Central Park photos. He claims that he ceased involvement with Epstein, but later emails were published suggesting that in February of 2011, he told Epstein, "We are in this together," despite later claiming he broke off all contact with the paedophile in December 2010. In 2015, Virginia Giuffre alleges in papers filed in Florida that she was forced to have sex with Andrew when she was 17, which is under the age of consent, in Florida. In 2016, as part of her civil suit against Maxwell, Giuffre testifies that Epstein paid her $15,000 to have sex with Andrew. In 2018, Andrew meets an alleged Chinese spy, Yang Tengbo, whom visits Buckingham Palace twice to meet with the prince. He's also said to have entered St. James's Palace and Windsor Castle at Andrew's invitation. Yang is later banned from Britain by the government on national security grounds following a long-running legal battle. In 2019, Andrew speaks to the BBC on Newsnight. It is an absolute car crash, even though he thinks that it goes well. Epstein is found dead in his jail cell. Later that month, a pilot on Epstein's private jet claims Andrew was a passenger on past flights with Epstein and Miss Giuffre. In the interview in November, Andrew says he had no recollection of ever meeting Miss Giuffre, and added that he couldn't have had sex with her in March 2001 because he was at Pizza Express with his daughter Beatrice on the day in question. The television sit-down was widely criticised and dubbed a car crash, with commentators questioning his responses and condemning his unsympathetic tone for victims and lack of remorse over his friendship with Epstein. 4 days following the interview, he then released a statement confirming he was stepping back from public duties for the foreseeable future with permission from Queen Elizabeth II. In January 2020, a US prosecutor claims Andrew has provided zero cooperation over the Epstein sex trafficking inquiry. It's also the case that Chinese spy Yang Tengbo is invited to Andrew's birthday party. A letter from aide Dominic Hampshire referencing the event is later found on Mr. Yang's devices. In 2021, Virginia Giuffre starts legal action against Andrew, saying it was past the time for him to be held to account for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. He is named as the only defendant in the 15-page suit, although Epstein and Maxwell are mentioned frequently throughout. In January 2022, a US judge rules the civil case against Andrew can go ahead. He'd argued that it should be thrown out. His status as a member of the royal family is downgraded after Queen Elizabeth strips him of his honorary military roles, and he gives up his HRH style in a dramatic fallout from the civil case. He's also stripped of his remaining royal patronages. The development came after more than 150 veterans joined forces to express their outrage, writing to the late Queen to demand the removal of the honorary military positions. In February, court documents show that Prince Andrew and Miss Giuffre have reached a settlement in principle in the civil sex claim, with Andrew making a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity in support of victims' rights. The High Court in 2024 reveals Prince Andrew's links with Yang. The allegations against Prince Andrew resurface again in unsealed documents as part of Virginia Giuffre's civil claim against Maxwell. These claims include the prince being involved in sex tapes, as well as resurfaced allegations of his participation in an underage orgy. There are further allegations in relation to his involvement with another Chinese spy that have come out in the course of this year. It's alleged that he was involved with a friendship with a Chinese Communist Party Mandarin, Kai Qi, with the pair posing as they celebrated jointly building a golden era in China-UK relations. It's believed that Kai was presiding over a massive intelligence gathering operation to steal British secrets, overseeing the alleged activities of parliamentary researcher Christopher Cash and China-based English teacher Christopher Berry. Once again, the lack of foresight is demonstrated by Prince Andrew. Earlier this year, in April, Virginia Giuffre dies, and in her memoir, due to be released in October, Miss Giuffre writes that Andrew considered it his birthright to have sex with her, saying the prince was friendly enough but still entitled. She talks about an orgy that Epstein, Andy, and approximately 8 other young girls and I had sex together. It then follows that Buckingham Palace announces that Andrew will stop using his title and honours, including the title of the Duke of York. A pattern of privilege, and one whereby the arrogance of this man has been demonstrated time and time again. He has repeatedly been accused of being involved in sexual assault. He has been accused of being involved in sex parties and orgies. The allegations just won't go away. He has been an individual that was dubbed Air Miles Andy, that milked the taxpayer privileges that he had. In the other videos, I've categorised many instances of his haughty and dismissive behaviours, the way that he's interpersonally exploitative with regard to his relationships. I analysed the video where his hands are all over his daughter in a rather strange display that was also in public. But what is evident is that notwithstanding the fact that he's engaged in these behaviours and that it was 6 years ago that he had to step back and he was involved in that car crash interview, he has continued to behave in a manner where he has shown no remorse, that he, in essence, does not see that he's done anything wrong. With no awareness of his behaviour and operating with a rampant sense of entitlement, again and again he is engaged in behaviours which have ultimately come back to bite him on the backside. His involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, his lies about his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, his use of Jeffrey Epstein to obtain money for Fergie, his involvement with Virginia Giuffre, although he denies it, his involvement with Epstein and Maxwell, his involvement of utilising his position as a trade envoy to basically go around the world shagging and partying on the taxpayer's dime, his behaviours in relation to his involvement with 2 Chinese spies as a consequence of his desperation to cozy up to anyone, the fact that he sold his house for £3 million more than it was worth to a Kazakhstani individual of dubious provenance who then allowed the mansion to remain unoccupied and derelict. Time and time again, Prince Andrew has exhibited a complete lack of judgment, and this has arisen as a consequence of the fact that in each moment his narcissism has directed him to behave in a way to pursue the prime aims without any due regard for the impact that it will have upon anybody else. The impact that it has upon his siblings, his late parents, even his own children. Sarah Ferguson is just that now. She has lost her title. In many ways, she's just as bad as Andrew. The daughters, they remain princesses. But the fact is that, again, the embarrassment and shame that he has caused them was never a consideration because of his tunnel vision of operating in the moment. That even when he has engaged in behaviour which is problematic, he has not seen it as such, and therefore he has never corrected himself. Surrounded by people that would do his bidding because they have to, he's taken advantage of that. And you've heard the tales in relation to the way that he's treated staff, belittling them and berating them. The way that he believed he was entitled to do whatever he wanted. The way that he could go wherever he chose. His arguments with Charles over the Royal Lodge. Why should this man remain in a 13-room mansion when it is completely unnecessary for him to remain there? But he insists, pointing to the supposedly watertight lease that he has that lasts until somewhere in the 2070s. He's a buffoon, a haughty, arrogant, entitled buffoon. And he's fucked up, because with each instance of dubious activity, whether it's from berating staff, taking money that he shouldn't have done, or fraternising with individuals of dubious provenance, not only has he never seen anything wrong with that, but he's repeatedly done it. And now you see the collateral consequences. That for every lambasting of a courtier that he's engaged in, for every meeting that he had with Epstein, for every shady deal that he sought to do with a dubious business individual, for every piece of fraternisation with a Chinese spy, it's eventually surfaced. And the consequence is that ultimately Charles, after what was, in effect, 6 days of relentless media coverage of this, decided this is enough. He must be stripped of his titles and in effect consigned to oblivion. Naturally, this amounts to a significant threat to control for Prince Andrew, But what it does demonstrate is that the upper lesser type A that he is just barreled through life in an oblivious fashion, propelled by entitlement and haughtiness, and now, as is invariably the case, the repercussions land with him. That those chickens have come home to roost. And this is what you see with the narcissist. That where you're dealing with the lesser and mid-range narcissist, that the conduct has a repercussion. The narcissist, of course, forever remains the victim. Andrew will be feeling sorry for himself. He will see it as unfair and unjust, because that's the way that his narcissism causes him to think. He'll be feeling very sorry for himself. This is a man who basically does very little every day. That whilst you are out there working in situations where there's an increased cost of living, this man just rides horses, goes shooting, plays golf, watches television. His life continued to be paid for. He still has that privilege. But with that, he has now been exposed for the unpleasant individual, the freeloading man that he is. And status has been stripped from him. It is an excellent example of not only the various ways that the narcissist behaves, showing their narcissism, which I pointed out in previous videos, but how, as a consequence of his narcissism, he doesn't see that there is anything wrong with what he does, and then years later the repercussions occur. And I think that there is more that will come out in relation to him. I also think that one of the reasons why Fergie was always kept around and was treated relatively well by him, even though the fact that they divorced, was because she also knows where many of the bodies are metaphorically buried, and therefore it was prudent to keep her on side. The fact is, this is a man with zero emotional empathy who doesn't give a shit about anybody other than himself. He was catapulted into privilege, and if he'd had a different type of personality, he could have enjoyed that privilege, attended to service, been thought of particularly well as he used to be, at the height of his powers perhaps following the Falklands War. But because of his narcissism, and this is not to make excuses for him, but it is simply to explain the way that he behaves, he then has engaged in a catalogue of behaviours which has resulted in this fall from grace. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.